Savvy. That's, I guess. Computer's not acting good. Alrighty. So I'm going to just share the page.
Give you a real Gemara on paper.
Yeah, anyone wants to join more? We're Gemara Megillah, page 5A. Okay. So we're learning with Rabbi Steinzotz. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to start. The Mishnah says, so we learned about large cities, small cities, walled cities, and unwalled cities. And the difference is that large cities would read on its appropriate day, which is the 14th. Small villages that have, the Gemara said different reasons, but let's just say the reason is because people in the small village don't have a minyan, or people in the small village are required to help the cities that are larger with the foods and the drinks, meaning the water and the food that they would bring in from the fields for this Purim Suda. So for these various reasons, or some say because of their general contribution to the cause, that they're people that provide the food. So therefore, the rabbis allowed for them, and we have a source from it that we learned about in the Megillah to support that they could start reading 11, 12, 13 when it's a day of gathering. So if they're going to come into the city and make it easier for them to not have to come twice, or a time that's outside of that their regular schedule. So we're sensitive to that, and we let them come in. Also, it allows, kind of keeps some sort of structure. But the question is, what is considered a village and what's considered a large city? So the Mishnah says, Ezehi Ir Gedola. This is again page 5a. What is considered a large city that would do the Purim in its appropriate time, which is the 14th, which is Kol Sheyesh Basar Batan. You have to have, we learned this idea before, that you have to have 10 idlers, people who do nothing. They just are community people. That's most opinions, where they're available for a minyan, available for a kaddish, available for a shiva, available for a levaya, for a burial. But if you don't have 10 idlers, then you're a village. A village is a village. Now, according to some people, that as long as you have a set minyan, people that you know would show up to the minyan that you could rely on, and a lot of cities want to make sure that they have that. Not that many cities have 10 idle people, very few actually. Maybe Yerushalayim does or New York does, but very few cities actually have 10 people that are just, on payroll for this from the city fund to be available. So like Seattle, I don't believe has that. You can maybe call a koilel that. A koilel doesn't. They're not idlers. They're not looking to. They're not your people you would call for a shiva or for a levaya. They're learning Torah. So the other people say that as long as there's a set minyan, that every day we know for sure these 10 people show up in town. Otherwise, then it's a kfar, it's a village, and then they could read 11, 12, 13. He says, Rabbi Shenzos quotes from the Rambam, Sefer Zmanim, a city that does not have 10 regular idlers is in the synagogue, has the halacha of a village during the period when the reading of the Megillah for villagers was advanced to the day of assembly. It was advanced in these places as well, meaning in places of a city that didn't have 10 idlers. I actually think, I don't know why I didn't have, I think we've done this actually. Let's go and go further down. We've done this. We've learned this. We're going to go further down. I think actually in this class we've done this. So we're going to go further down to Chagiga. I don't think we learned this. So Chagiga, so we're talking about, so the Mishnah before that we learned just started before, goes into, in general, we have other times in the calendar where we have to either backdate or push forward events. For instance, we have to backdate the Megillah for 11, 12, 13, for the Shabbos. We have to postpone other events. For instance, the Mishnah says, we're going a little further down the page, if you're going to donate the wood to the temple, and you're from the family that gets to donate the wood, but your donation, which cannot be done on Shabbos because we can't bring the wood on Shabbos, has to be brought the day after Sunday if it falls out on Shabbos. And there's a variety of reasons for each one of the cases that the Mishnah quotes. I do believe we learned it. I don't know why it wasn't showing on my phone. But here goes the next one. This is a very interesting law, the law of Chagiga. I don't know if everyone's familiar, but if you open the Rambam, right, the beginning of the Rambam goes into what was tradition of Torah. Torah came down. We're learning now Matan Torah. We're learning just a few weeks ago. God gave the Torah to Moshe, and He gives it to Joshua, who gives it to the elders, who gives it to the prophets, and that takes us through the first temple. And then the members of the Great Assembly are the keepers of the Torah throughout the diaspora of the first exile, which is the story of Purim. Mordechai is one of those people. And then we start with the Tanoim age, which goes from Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the Righteous, who's the last of Shimon the Righteous, who's from the last of the members of the Great Assembly, and he's the one who with Ezra and Nehemiah, but he kind of takes the Torah over into the second temple time, which starts really what's called the era of the Zugim, of the couples, where you had a joint leadership, and this went pretty much for a long time in the Jewish people. The joint leadership was a Nasi and an Av Bezdin. A Nasi was the head of the Jewish people. It's called the prince. Like Yehuda Nasi is the most famous of them all, the one who authored the Mishnah. And you have the head of the Bezdin. For instance, an example, two of the famous ones are Shammai and Hillel. So Hillel, the elder, and this comes to our story here. Hillel, the elder, is the Nasi. Shammai is the Av Bezdin, the head of the Bezdin. And they kind of had different views of things, and they opened up different schools. We have the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai. And up until kind of post-destruction, which is over 100 years, there was these two great schools, and they had a lot of disagreements. They didn't get along much in the law. And we know that the rule is that we rule according to the house of Hillel, and unless a few times that we go according to the house of Shammai, but the house of Hillel is the law. They say when Mashiach comes, we're going to reverse it. Mashiach comes, the law is going to go with the house of Shammai. One of the famous arguments is how do we light the menorah? Do we start lighting the menorah with one candle, or we start lighting the menorah with 8 candles and go down? So the house of Shammai says the first night we light 8 candles, and the second night we light 7 candles, and the third night we light 6 candles, etc., until the last night we light 1 candle. And we know that's not how we light our menorah. We light the first menorah, we light the first night the first candle, second night 2 candles, 3. And so who's that? That's the opinion of Hillel. So we say when Mashiach comes, it's going to be reversed, because we're still going to celebrate the holiday of Hanukkah, and then we're going to relight the candles. The 8th night is going to be we have someone joined us here. The 8th night is going to be the first night is going to be 8 candles. The Rebbe always would talk about what would happen if Mashiach comes in the middle of Hanukkah. And we have to switch the law middle. So we're like, let's say you're lighting the first night, it's Mashiach's not here, you light 1 candle. Second night, unfortunately, Mashiach didn't come yet, so you light 2 candles. Third night, 3 candles. Fourth night, Mashiach comes. It's like going the other direction. You never get to 8 candles, right? You start going backwards according to Shammai. They have all these questions. Hopefully we'll have to deal with them soon. But here's the first argument. Before Hillel and Shammai, there were other Zugim. And one of the first Zugim were Yosef ben Yoezer Ish Yerushalayim and Yosef ben Yoezer Ish Sreira and Yosef ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalayim. We talk about them in the first chapter of Pirkei Avos. They had the first disagreement in Torah. Up until that point, there was no disagreements. There could have been discussions. I'm sure there was discussions, right? They had Beis Medrash, and David HaMelech had his Beis Medrash, and Samuel had his Beis Medrash, and we say Shimshon, the Gibor, had his Beis Medrash. I'm sure they had a discussion. It wasn't just everyone listening and shaking their heads. I'm sure they talked the issues out, but they come to consensus of what the law was. The first time there was a disagreement in the law was when it comes to the laws of getting closer to Pesach, is something that's connected to Pesach, which is the law of when you have the holidays. So are you allowed to sacrifice the Chagiga sacrifice on Shabbos, on the Shabbos? So there's two issues that we have over here, and then it goes into further questions. So let's open up the Gemara and see. So what's Chagiga? So the Gemara says Tana Chagiga, B'chol Chagiga. So we postpone, it says, the festival offering. So what's the festival offering? Chagiga, there's two offerings that we had to bring on the holiday. One which is a korban oilos riyah, which was a burnt sacrifice. And the other sacrifice we brought was the Chagiga, which was the shlamim with the peace sacrifice. What was the difference between the burnt sacrifice and the peace sacrifice? The burnt sacrifice was, by definition, it was burnt. There was no part to the owner. The owner didn't eat anything. No one ate any part of it. The only part that was eaten was the only part that was eaten was the mizbeach. Only the altar was able to was consumed the entire burnt sacrifice. The holiday sacrifice, meaning the shlamim, the peace sacrifice, only small parts went on the sacrifice on the altar. Parts were given to the kohen as their portion, and the rest was you went home and you had a barbecue feast with your family. That was your Yom Tov meal. Now, what happens if Shabbos falls out on Yom Tov? Are you allowed to do these sacrifices on Yom Tov? Right. So we have.
This is the moment where they're actually going to decide. It's the first time.
This is the first disagreement that they're going to go into. The question we're going to have is everyone agrees that you can't do even the peace sacrifice on the Shabbos because you could push it off to Sunday. You have more time. You have what's called you made tashlumim. You have days that you could make up. Not everyone was able to sacrifice on the first day. Some people were like, I went to Kubit Cholim Yochedet a few nights ago. I was like, maybe it's quiet now. I'm going to go down there. Unfortunately, I made a mistake. It was jammed. I didn't realize that the night is not a good time to go to the Yochedet pharmacy in the religious area. It's better to go in the morning. Anyway, I went the next morning, it was empty. But imagine you have people that are not crowd people. They're not, they need a quiet, more relaxed day to come to their sacrifice. And they come in the middle of the holiday where it's less hectic and they're able to sacrifice their peace sacrifice. So if it would fall out on Yom Tov, if it falls out on Yom Tov, so the question is, do we do the
Yom Tov or Shabbos?
If Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, so then we do not do the Chagiga, we do not do the peace offering, peace sacrifice on the Shabbos, because you can push it off. So he said, but what happens? What about the burnt sacrifice? Can we do the burnt sacrifice on Yom Tov? Even for sure, Shabbos we can, but can we even do the burnt sacrifice at all on Yom Tov? Because you're only allowed to do food for yourself, lachem. But for heaven, maybe you can't. Bring your burnt sacrifice on the Chol HaMoed. The two questions was about if the peace sacrifice could be brought on Yom Tov. That was the argument. Second one, if the burnt sacrifice, and also the laws of smicha. Smicha are the laws of you had to confess on your sacrifice. And we know the law of Shabbos is you're not allowed to touch the animals on the Shabbos and Yom Tov. You're not allowed to just walk over with the horse and start leaning on it on Shabbos and Yom Tov. You're not allowed. It's part of Muksa. So the question is, are you allowed to halachically put your hands on the animal on Shabbos or not? And do you have to put your hands on the animal right before the sacrifice, the slaughtering or not? All these things came into the question, the debate. And the debate got so riled up that how did Hillel the wise, the elder, become the Nasi? How did he get the job? We all know that Hillel was a poor boy who made his way up alone from Babylonia. He was so poor he couldn't even pay the entrance fee to the Yeshiva. So he had to listen to the shiur on top by the window. And the story got snowed in and he was covered in snow because he was listening to the Torah from Shmai Vavtain because he couldn't pay the entrance fee. So how did he become the leader of the Jewish people? It was because it was 1 year Pesach. And it was Shabbos. And the rabbis forgot if you're allowed to sacrifice the korban Pesach on Shabbos. And they asked Hillel the elder. They said he knows because he sat there. I mean, he sat there with his ear pierced against the window. He never missed a word of Torah. And when he was able to prove them in the ways of Torah that you're allowed to sacrifice, of course, the korban Pesach on Shabbos. So they right away he was made immediately like Yosef. Yosef became viceroy. As soon as he solved Paro's dreams, so he's the smartest man in the room, he's king. Same thing, Hillel. As soon as Hillel was able to guide the Jewish people about sacrifice on Pesach, that's it. They demoted whoever was in charge then, the Bnei Besora, and they promoted Hillel the elder. He became the Nasi. Well, let's see it inside. We learned in a brisa. Chagiga v'chozman chagiga ma'achron. The holiday sacrifice, the shlamim means the peace sacrifice, and all the time of the peace sacrifice gets moved up. So with the question is, what are we talking about? What if you're talking about the actual peace sacrifice of the holiday? The Megila b'Shabbat, if it falls out on Shabbos, then you have to push it off. Everyone agrees that you push it off to Sunday because you cannot do the peace sacrifice on Shabbos. Now, I just want to say incidentally, the way the Korban Pesach happened was, you look at I don't know if anyone's ever actually sacrificed the lamb. My brother was, I don't know if you've ever gone up to Lag BaOmer, you go up to Miron, and so some Sephardi customs are that the families gather together and they have a sheep and they slaughter the sheep. So you would think that everyone's feasting on this large sheep. That a sheep doesn't yield a lot of meat, especially if you have to divide it amongst a lot of people. So the feast wasn't the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach was actually ala soba. You had to eat it when you were full. You had a little piece of meat, a little kazayis. You got a half a lamb chop. That was your Korban Pesach. And you had to make sure it wasn't left over. So you had to have enough of a group that everyone could cover but you're supposed to eat it full. What did you eat before? What made you full? The Korban Chagiga. You ate the holiday sacrifice, which is the peace sacrifice. That's what you had dinner on, Sudas Yom Tov. And then for dessert, for the Afikomen, you had the Korban Pesach. That only works if Pesach falls out on any day of the week. But if the 14th falls out on Shabbos, you had nothing to eat on Saturday night from the Korban Pesach, from the Chagiga. So all you ate was the Korban Pesach because you couldn't slaughter the Chagiga. So back to our case over here. So so if you're talking about the Chagiga gets pushed off to Sunday, Zman Chagiga Mai, what does it mean, the time of the holiday sacrifice? So Rabbi Oishi says as follows. This is what the Brisa means. Chagiga b'Shabbos, that if Chagiga falls out on Shabbos, that means that Shabbos, the holiday falls on Shabbos, then the Korban Chagiga, which is the peace sacrifice, which is the Korban that you eat, gets pushed off to Sunday. But the burnt sacrifice, afilu b'Yom even on the holiday, you're not allowed to burn it, even if the holiday falls out in a weekday. Zman Chagiga ma'achron, because we always push off the burnt sacrifice. So the Gemara says like this. Mani, who holds this opinion? This is not everyone's opinion. It's not the universal opinion. So the Gemara says, Beis Shammai, this is the house of Shammai. And this is really one of the first arguments. And this argument got violent. Hillel the elder, Hillel the Zaken, was how to sneak in a sacrifice to the temple because he was going to get abused and molested by the house of Shammai students. And we know actually in politics that in the war of the destruction of the temple, that the house of Shammai were kind of the zealots, and they were on the zealots groups. They were not for negotiating some sort of agreement with the Romans, which is more Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which was from the house of Hillel. They were more looking to make an agreement with the Romans. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was, we all know, very against the war, the fight against the Romans. But they say the house of Shammai, they were more chevra, they wanted they were protectors of the faith, and they didn't want to give any concessions to the Romans. It didn't work out for them. So Mani, who is this opinion by Shammai? The Tanan, we learned. Shammai holds like this, that you are allowed to bring the Korban Chagiga on Yom Tov, but you have to do your pressing of the hands, the smicha. It's called smicha. Smicha means the pressing of the hands. And the word soimech, to lean. The leaning of the hands was done on, you don't do it. You can't do the smicha. Why? Because the smicha has to be done right before the sacrifice, and you can't smicha on Yom Tov. Where Beis Hillel holds, you're allowed to do smicha on the Yom Tov, on the Shabbos before. So he says like this: Mevim shlamim b'Yom Tov ein tzem chalin. Let's see Rashi. Rashi says, Mevim shlam b'Yom Tov shein ma'achel adam b'Yom Tov. You're allowed to eat, so you could bring the sacrifice. Like it says, Acha sheyechel chol nefesh. Ve'ein tzem chalin says smicha shpusi. You're not allowed to lean on it because leaning on it is a violation of the resting of Shabbos and Yom Tiv. Elu hein mishum shvus leirechem agabehem. You're not allowed to ride on an animal. What did they do in the house of Shammai? They would lean on it and confess on Friday, and then sacrifice it on the Shabbos. The house of Hillel said, no, you could lean on it on Shabbos, and you could sacrifice it on Shabbos. The last of the Beis Shammai take the smicha shchita. Why? Because Beis Shammai says it's okay. You could do confession. What's the issue? You have a lot of issues that come up in this whole argument. One of the issues is, can you confess for something predated? Right? You've asked this. The sacrifice is the conclusion of your atonement. Right? That's a sacrifice. If you're doing smicha, you're doing confession. You can't. The smicha itself is not the process. It's just the preparation for the sacrifice. So if I do imagine you say, you know what, Yom Kippur, I'm gonna do all my vidui on 3 days before Yom Kippur. I'm going to confess, and then Yom Kippur I'm just going to relax or learn, or I don't want to do confession on Yom Kippur. No, the day of confession is on the day of the time. You can't do confession predated. So the house of Shammai says, well, you could lean on it the day before because you could do confession before, and then sacrifice it on the day.
What if it developed a moment between that time?
It's a good question. You have a problem. Then you can't sacrifice the sacrifice for sure. And then according to the house of Shammai, you would have to wait till Sunday because you can't do smicha on Yom Tov according to the house of Shammai. The house of Hill says you could do smicha on Yom Tov. It wouldn't be a problem. That's what happened. Hill the elder came into the temple, and he did smicha. He tried to hide it from the house of Shammai. They started to harass him. They got and say because he kind of tried to avoid machlekes. He said no, it's a different sacrifice, and so he lost a little bit of his rule, and that day a lot of the laws went according to the house of Shammai. He didn't have what they call in Yiddish stoltz. You know what stoltz is? He wasn't strong enough to say, this is my opinion. This is what I'm doing. I'm in the temple. I'm the Nasi, and we're leaning on the korban in the Beis Mikdash. He didn't want to make you don't want to rattle the house of Shammai guys. So he kind of just said no. It's another kind of sacrifice because he wasn't strong, solid. So they kind of demoted him a bit on that day where he lost a little bit of the laws according to his opinion. So he says that. So what do? They have to bring it. They do smicha before, and then so the house of Hill says differently. The house of Hill says no. We do smicha on Yom Tif, and we sacrifice the chagiga on Yom Tif. Also, Beis Hill disagrees that Beis Hill says meibim shlavim v'oilais v'sayim chemale. Beis Hill says on Yom Tif you could bring the bird sacrifice, so they disagree with Shammai on that. You bring the holiday sacrifice. Everyone agrees you can bring it, and you could do your smicha. You could put your hands on it. So and confess on the day. So basically, we have 3 scenarios. If Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, let's say Mashiach comes, hopefully he will this Pesach, and for some way or another, there's going to be a Shabbos Yom Tov. I don't know what the schedule is this year. But let's say Pesach would fall out on the 14th, would fall out on Shabbos. So everyone agrees in that scenario, we would not do the Korban Chagiga on the Shabbos. We would sacrifice our Paschal lamb. And I'm not sure what I guess you eat some matzah and other things, but you can't eat you don't have any other meats really to eat unless you, I guess, maybe you prepared something before. But you're not eating from the korban. And actually, if anyone pays attention, the actual nusach, the wording of the tefillos changes because when we talk about in the blessing during the Haggadah, during the Pesach ceremony, we actually talk about this whole thing. We say, min ha-psachim and min ha-zvachim, min ha-zvachim min ha-psachim. If it's during the week, so we say that we sacrifice our zvachim, our holiday sacrifices, and then we sacrifice our psachim, our Paschal sacrifice. But if it's Matzah Shabbos, we say psachim, we do first the Paschal, because we don't bring the chagiga until Sunday morning. And then it says, kind of, you're not eating full. If Yom Tov falls out in the week, so according to the house of Hillel, you would bring both sacrifices for the holiday, meaning the burnt sacrifice and the peace sacrifice. And according to the house of Shammai, you would only bring the peace sacrifice, you would not bring the burnt sacrifice. So therefore, according to the house of Shammai, and that's our Mishnah, that whenever Yom Tov happens, you never sacrifice the burnt sacrifice on Yom Tov, and you always push it off to Sunday. That's one thing where we see again, we're pushing it off for a further day. Rava Amar like this. Rava teaches like another idea. Chagiga kozman chagiga machin tafiloi. That we have to know something else. A person only has these 7 days to push off. If you want to be, whatever reason, I always wondered if they even were able to sacrifice everyone sacrifice on the day of. Let's say everyone showed up and says, I want to sacrifice on the, I don't know if you guys live here in the old city, most of you know. If you don't live in the old city, you try to get in last week to shul. So all of a sudden everyone's getting aggressive to try to get into the old city. Why? Because when you're not allowed to get in, you want to get in. So everyone's trying to get into the old city. So this guy's walking through this gate and walking through that gate. But you have the same thing. You can imagine at the temple, you had the people that wanted to sacrifice on the day. I want to do it on the first day. So the question is if they were able. I mean, they did the Paschal sacrifice for everyone in a few hours. So you can imagine maybe they could have, but maybe the Chagiga is more difficult. But either way, you only have those 7 days. And by the way, what do we do in Shavuos? Shavuos is a one-day holiday. In outside of Eretz Yisrael, it's 2 days, but it's really a one-day holiday. You don't have 7 days to bring the sacrifice. So what did you do? So the thing is, they always gave 7 days. Even if the holiday ends after 1 day, which is only Shavuos, they always gave us up to 7 days. That's why, if you ever paid attention, that when you're in shul on the week after Shavuos, we don't say Tachnun. Why don't we say Tachnun? We don't say the confession, because it's a kind of a quasi-holiday, because you have the 7 days to bring the sacrifice. But after that, after the 7 days, you don't have more time. You have the rest of the holiday to bring your sacrifices. And you have the last day. What happens if the holiday passes? It's already the 22nd of the month. And you didn't bring your sacrifices. So you can't come in on day after Yom Tov and say, I'd like to bring my holiday sacrifices today. That doesn't work. You have only the 7 days to bring them. After that, you can't bring the sacrifice. The Gemara continues. He says like this: Rabbi Ashi Amar, it's common to teach us that even the Shavuos, like I said, even Shavuos, the Chag Yoim Ma'achrin, it's only 1 day. Nevertheless, we give them 7 days to bring the sacrifices. The Tanan, as we learn Moedim, everyone agrees. Even Beis Hillel agrees that if Shavuos falls on Shabbos, Shabbos. When is the day that we bring this holiday sacrifice? On Sunday. Although Sunday is not a holiday. Sunday is post-holiday. But even Shavuos gives 7 days. Okay, so what do we see from this whole little piece of Talmud that we studied now? What we see from this piece of Talmud is that, and this completes this piece, that there's the holidays sacrifices get pushed forward, not backwards, like the Megillah. And why would we push it forward? It depends according to whom. If you're talking about the house of Shammai, we push all Shabbos, we would push all the sacrifices forward. And the Yom Tov, we always push the burnt sacrifice. According to the house of Hillel, we push on the Shabbos the sacrifices to Sunday, and then we have up until the end of the holiday. And if it's the Shabbos, then you could bring, if it's the regular weekday, then you could bring both sacrifices, the burnt sacrifice and the Chagiga sacrifice. And we also learned about the laws of Smicha. Smicha is, do we do the confession? I mean, this is the thing that are questions that are going to be coming up very soon, God willing. Would we do the Smicha for the animal on the Yom Tov? You have to remember, this is a whole process to do Smicha. You have to come in and lean in and confess on the animal, and it's part of the balagan of making a korban. It's part of the excitement. So Beis Shammai says you could do it on Friday. It's not so bad. But Beis Hillel says no, you have to do it on the day of the sacrifice. So these are all the questions that we're talking about over here. Okay, now we're going to go back to the story before. Amar Rabbi Lezer teaches as follows. Amar Rabbi Chanina, in the name of Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Nata Bepurim. Natia Bepurim. That Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbeinu Yehuda Nasi. Now, where did Rabbi Yehuda Nasi live? If anyone is familiar with the map of the north, the Galil, so we know, you ever been to Tzipori? Any of you guys been to Tzipori, the city of Tzipori? Tzipori is west of Tiberias directly, the straight line west. It's like in the hills going towards the sea. So it's like up in the mountains. So it's about a maybe a 30-minute drive today from Tzipori to Tiberias and back. Okay, so Rebbe lived in both the cities of Tiberias and the city of Tzipori. He moved in his later years, he moved to the city of Tzipori. Those two cities were kind of the center of the north in the times of the Mishnah. And both the city of Tiberias and the city of Tzipori. The other cities that we have today that are large cities like Haifa or even Sfas are not really cities that were mentioned. Beit Shan was mentioned, and they have places in the Golan, Gamla. But the places, the center of the Sanhedrin, the center of the yeshivas, were in the cities of Tveria and the cities of Tzipori mainly. So Rebbe, not a Netiya B'Purim, Rebbe once planted a tree on Purim. Imagine Rebbe plants a tree on Purim. Everyone's outraged. What's Rebbe planting a tree on Purim for? What's the issue? Why is it worth mentioning that he planted the tree on Purim? But then he didn't just do that. He did something else. And he bathed in the wagons of Tzipori on the 17th of Tammuz.
What bathed?
Bathed.
Bathed.
Well, that's a good question. What does it mean, the wagons? So or it means that he did it in the place of the wagons, meaning in public, like in the market, where the people come with their wagons to sell their goods. Or the Rabbi Steinzat says, others say that a Karen over here is, what is he brings it down. A Karen is a wagon. Others say it's a spring, a public spring. But he kind of publicly bathed on the 17th of Tammuz. What's that mean? 17th of Tammuz is a fast day, right? That's the fourth fast day. This fast of Somer Avi, the fast of the fourth month.
You just jumped. I mean, he was planting a tree on Purim. And he was taking a
so he's doing certain things. We're quoting things that Rebbe did that kind of got attention.
Okay.
So he planted a tree on Purim, and he bathed in public on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. And this is really when he got to get people worked up. He tried to push off Tisha B'Av. Vikish the Akar Tisha B'Av. That already said, no, you can't do that. You can't push off Tisha B'Av. We don't know
He tried to push it off for himself, or he tried to push it off as something that
we'll see. The Gemara is in charge to figure this out. There's a lot of, from this we learn a lot of if you're going to go, we're not going through so much the commentaries, but the commentaries over here really discuss what are the questions. Let's just go through the questions here. The questions are you allowed to do work on Purim? So he planted a tree on Purim. That's work. Are you allowed to work on Purim? Right? Is Purim, what level of holiday is Purim?
And in other words, this is like a couple of 100 years after Purim, right?
That's 600 years after Purim.
And so why didn't they know that?
Good question. So the question is, you have to remember, Rebbe is the one who's the first person who's putting in the law into writing. And Rebbe was a very strong.
Well, there they are, and they're transcribing
and so he's making statements. He's making physical statements, not just halachic statements. He's actually acting on his opinions. He's planting a tree on Purim. He's bathing on the 17th of Tammuz, and he's looking to push away the fast of Tisha B'Av. And what are the issues in hand? This is the issue. Number one question is, on what day was he planting? Everyone's getting nervous. When is he planting a tree? What is the issue with planting a tree? What did Mordechai and Esther really want to accomplish? It's almost clear, according to most opinions, that we find that Mordechai in the Megillah, we find something very strange. The Megillah talks about the first Purim and the second Purim. First Purim was automatically, everyone's excited, right? The Jewish people were saved. It was a miracle. Everyone celebrated. Esther and Mordechai were concerned that would be it. That would kind of be whatever. It was nice, and then we move on. They wanted to make it an established holiday. So the next year, they sent out letters and said, you got to keep the holiday again. Evidently, from the wording of the Megillah, it seems that Esther and Mordechai wanted to make it a real straight-up holiday. They wanted it to be a holiday you wouldn't be able to to work like a regular Yom Tov. And they say that the Jews didn't say, they said, we get it, we're part of the Simcha, everyone's life, we were saved, all that. But we're not subscribing to that. We're not going to agree to.
Not a regal.
It's not a regal. We're not going to consider it a holiday 100%. But it's brought down halacha that if a person does work on Purim, unless you mamish have to, obviously if you're a doctor, things that you even have to work on Shabbos, we're saying, but even let's say things that are an emergency, but otherwise it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch. You will not see any success from any work you do on Purim ever. It's not going to yield any success. I don't know if that means you can't buy stocks or you can't, but you're not supposed to be doing any kind of. You won't see any success. There's 2 times of the year it tells us that. One time is
similar to a Talmud kind of an idea.
It's not exactly, because Chol Hamoed is really forbidden to do it halachically.
Oh.
But here, kind of, it says, so he wanted to plant the tree to make a statement. The question is, what day was he planting the tree? Was it his Purim, or was it was he a 15th guy planting on the 14th, or 14th guy planting on the 15th? Like, when was he doing this planting, and what kind of statement was he making? The Gemara is not so clear.
If he's taking a bath in public, then then he's like obviously looking for trouble.
Rabbi was huge.
Something is.
It didn't go off yet. The long didn't go off yet. I didn't get the message. I think you're set to another area.
No, that's a warning that that's going to be a siren.
The siren should go in 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But yesterday I got it a couple times.
You didn't get nothing.
No. No, you must have another area.
No, it's not. It's not that. They send it out.
This is brand new.
It can go to many areas.
Yeah, but only his phone a beat.
No, somebody else's. Didn't somebody else go out?
Oh, you also went out?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe. So when he's what is he bathing on the 17th? What's the question? Are you allowed to bathe on the 17th? Are you allowed to take a shower on the 17th of Tammuz? Oh, that was his point. That was his point. The question is, was that something new? Like you're asking, this is, the 17th is an old fast. What was Rabbi new? And what happened was like this. The law was like this. We have 2 sets of fasts, 2 types of fasts. We have the strict fast. We all know Yom Kippur, right? You can't have relations, you can't watch, you can't wear clothes, shoes, that's very strict. When else do we have a strict fast? Tisha B'Av, very strict. We can't do these things. What about in between other fasts like Tanis Esther or 17th or the 9th, the 10th of Teves, right? So those fasts we do wash them. We don't have to keep all the laws. So all the severities. So the question is, was it always like that? That there was just Tisha B'Av was a special day, or all the fasts were very intense? So the Gemara discusses that it depends. It depends how the situation is for the Jews. If the Jewish people are like in a really bad place and they're under persecution, so then you're talking about, then you have to keep like more strict fast. If things are really great, then there's maybe a question you shouldn't even have to fast. If things are not here or not there, which is pretty much where we're at now, I don't say things are great for the Jews, but not here, not there. So then you could decide. That's kind of where the Gemara is set up. In the times of Rabbi had a very, very close relationship with Antoninus. Antoninus, we're not sure exactly which emperor he was, if he was an emperor of all of Rome, or was he the governor of this area for Rome. It seems like Antoninus was the actual emperor of Rome. Rabbi and Antoninus were very close, personal friends. Literally, he would come learn Torah by Rabbi. According to some opinions, Antoninus even converted to Judaism. They were very close. Based on that close relationship, maybe the times of Rabbi, the Jewish people were in a time where he was making a statement that the fast of the 17th of Tammuz is not so severe. Okay, so because this is actually a more important law, we're going to actually go through Rabbi Steinsaltz's points on this. And the third thing is he tried to before we go to Rabbi Steinsaltz, he tried to uproot Tisha B'Av. We're not sure what he means by that. Some people say that he tried to lessen the severity of Tisha B'Av, to downgrade it to like a 17th of Tammuz kind of severity. Others say at the end we're going to conclude that it wasn't really that what it was this is the famous Rabbi that says that if Tisha B'Av falls out on the Shabbos, Rebbe's of the opinion that there's no such thing as a fast on Sunday. The Rebbe would quote this all the time, that
on Shabbos.
If Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, which it can happen, right? If Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, we fast on Sunday. Rebbe's of the opinion that keeping the itcha. If it falls out on Shabbos, we push it off, we don't fast. We don't go back, we don't fast on Sunday. That's Rebbe's opinion. But that the rabbis didn't give him. They gave him to plant his tree and they gave him to sit in the bats by the wagons, but not to push off Tisha B'Av. Okay, let's first see a little bit of Rabbi Steinsaltz's notes on these. First, Rabbi Steinsaltz gives us a little bit of insight of the city Tzipori. We got Tzipori, they have till today, Tzipori National Park. I think I saw that online, which is they have the ruins of the, I think, ancient Tzipori is still up there. Tzipori was a large city in the Upper Galilee, and it was a rival to the city of Tiberias for recognition of the religion capital of the Galil. Again, the Galil, I think, in the history, the even in the times of Herod, the Israel was divided into the north and Judah. Yehuda and the north were two separate kind of provinces. So even if there was issues of destruction of Jerusalem, not necessarily was that affecting the province of the Galil. At the end, it obviously the destruction affected everything. But there was a division within Eretz Yisrael. There was, when it comes to the laws of Trumas and Maishus, this kind of, we divide Israel to the north, the south, and the other side of the river. So the Galil was the capital. The Tiberia was one of the capitals of the Galil during the Second Temple period, and enjoyed special status among towns of the Galil due to its large learning Jewish community. Among the Tanoim, meaning the rabbis of the time of the Mishnah who lived there, were Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Rabbi Chalaft, I think this is, the famous Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi moved to Tzipori toward the end of his life for health reasons, and it was the seat of the Sanhedrin for about a generation. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, leading his disciples, lived in Tzipori, which were Rabbi Shmuel, son of Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Gamliel, son of Rabbi, who later was appointed as Nasi, his brother Reb Shimon, and Reb Chanina Bar Chama. They all lived in the city of Tzipori. Later, the head of Tzipori Yeshiva and Rabbi Yanai, even after the Sanhedrin moved back to Tiberias, he lived in Tzipori. So great people lived in Tzipori. Torah scholars continued to live in Tzipori. Among them, important Amoraim in Eretz Yisrael was Rab Chanina of Tzipori and Rab Mana. Okay, so he's just saying that Tzipori was a prominent city of the Galil. The Rashba right now, regarding Ronnie's question, what was going on the 17th of Tammuz? So the Rashba, which is one of the commentaries of Shlomo ben Aderet, he writes that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's behavior was in accordance with the principle set forth in the tractate Rosh Hashanah 18b, where it states that in times of peace, one need not observe the fast days of the 17th of Tammuz, the fast of Gedalia, and the 10th of Teves. So those three fasts, if it's 100% peace, and that's why I'm sure you have people today that will say, "Oh, Jewish people are so strong."
What about Esther? They didn't mention that one.
No, it doesn't mention that one. That's a kind of a separate fast that's connected to the story of Purim directly. These are fasts that are connected to the destruction of the temple. So these three fasts don't have to be fasts. In times when there are evil decrees against the Jewish people, these fasts are obligatory. And in times which are neither peaceful nor times of evil decree, kind of light anti-Semitism, these fasts are optional. Okay. During the time of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, these fasts were optional. Yet the Jewish people had accepted upon itself the obligation to fast. Nonetheless, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was of the opinion that this voluntary acceptance applied only to the actual fasting, but not to the other prohibitions of the fast day, in other words, bathing. Meaning, it seems from the Rashba that when things are really bad for the Jewish people, which were not in the times of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, we had plenty of those years too, these fasts were actually as strict as Tisha B'Av, where you couldn't bathe. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was making a statement, says, yes, we accepted upon ourselves to fast, even though it's optional, but we took upon ourselves to fast. But that doesn't mean we have to be so severe where we can't bathe. So therefore, he bathed the public to make a statement. In other words, there are those who add that according to the comment of Abba Ba'azavda that the 9th occurred on Shabbos, if this incident of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi bathing on the 17th took place in the same year, it would mean that 17th Tammuz also occurred on Shabbos, which was postponed to Sunday So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was making even a bigger kind of leniency, meaning to say that because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is the opinion that a fast day that's on Shabbos gets pushed off for good. So therefore, the 17th of Tammuz was not a fast day, so he bathed. But either way, the law is that you can bathe on the 17th of Tammuz. Now, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch actually writes with regard to the 17th of Tammuz about certain things, not melacha or bathing, but for instance, marital relationships. It says that if you avoid to do it on the 17th of Tammuz, tavel of bracha. Why? Because it's not because you're accepting on yourself extra strictness, because there is a basis where the fast of the 17th of Tammuz and 10th of Teves and Gedali fast should be more severe. And it's not so clear what times we live in. I remember there was not going to mention names here, but there was a member of Chavi Knesset many years ago, not so many years ago, who publicly said that he's going to only fast a half of Tisha B'Av, and then he's going to make a feast because there's no reason to fast anymore in Tisha B'Av. But although that at the time people were like, throwing eggs and getting all worked up, but there's a little bit of a basis for it based on the idea that not for Tisha B'Av, but for other fasts, that if you believe that we live in good times, then the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says that you don't have to fast. Okay, but that's not up for option anymore. Everyone fasts, and no matter how good you think the times are, because they're never as good as you think they are, and they're never maybe as bad as we think they are either. Perhaps Rabbi Yehuda, okay, that's Rabbi Yaakov Emden says. Oh, so he says like this. What does it mean that he wanted to abolish the fast of Tisha B'Av? Why would Rabbi Yehuda Nasi want to abolish? So he said like this. Tosfos explains. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't seek to abolish the fast completely, but rather to abolish its severity and make it equivalent to the fast of the 17th of Tammuz. And Rabbi felt that in his times, he had a great relationship with the Caesar, with Antoninus. Things weren't as bad, although it didn't last long at all. The time his grandson was Hillel II the Constantine came and it got really bad. But for a little while, it was kind of quiet. It was after the Dor Shmad, after Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, between Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, kind of things were a little more settled, and Torah was flourishing in the north. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi felt maybe it was time to downgrade the fast of Tisha B'Av and not include in it the prohibition of washing or the prohibition of relationships like wearing non-leather shoes, etc. And the rabbis did not agree with him to that. Why? Because the reason the rabbis didn't agree with him on that was because Tisha B'Av has, a list of things that happened wrong. 2 temples, spies coming back.
Why didn't he know then?
He did know that, but he was in the opinion. These are what's called an argument. He was in the opinion that these arguments are still around today. How do we view Galus? How do we view these things? How are we supposed to? When we look today, everyone's excited. How do we translate that to the reality of Galus? And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was kind of saying we're living in better times.
Certain things are just absolutely part of the fabric of they're rock solid. So again, I just don't know how all of a sudden I'm not, it's like we've been buddies for so many years, but every now and then if I might ask for a heter or something, I know he's not going to give it to me, but I like to ask. And then we laugh about it for a second and then I don't get it. But it just feels a little bit of folly. It seems like there's something there that what were you thinking?
No, he didn't. They didn't accept it. He didn't change his opinion. That was his opinion. According to this, we're holding the Havamina of the Gemara. The Gemara is going to say that wasn't what he was trying to do. He was trying to just to push it off that if it fell out on Shabbos. But according to this opinion, that means you have to remember the Gemara goes. The Gemara is not a book of law. The Gemara is a flow to the Gemara, and the Gemara, especially the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, likes to record how we get to a conclusion. We ask many questions that we could always get to the answer from the beginning.
So this is definitely before Shulchan Aruch even existed.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Even in a few lines, we're going to see that there's another opinion that this is not the story. You misunderstood the story, that he wasn't trying to uproot the severity of Tisha B'Av. He was just trying to push it off if it fell out on a Shabbos that we're not going to fast on a Sunday. But Tosfos and the Ritva and the Rashba, they're all analyzing the Havamina of the Gemara. It means that you would think, so Tosfos, why is Tosfos even wasting time? discussing what the Gemara initially thought. If there's going to be another answer, that's going to say that we're talking about another scenario. That's not how the Gemara works. The Gemara, we have to learn from the conversation of the Talmud. That's all. We study from all parts of the Talmud. So therefore, you have the Tosfos that goes and says, "What was we stop the Talmud right now, and Rabbi is trying to do something on Tisha B'Av." So Tosfos says, "No. He wasn't trying to abolish the holiday, the fast. He was just trying to downgrade it from its severity to be like Shiva Asur B'Tammuz. It's like the 17th of Tammuz. It shouldn't be as severe as Tisha B'Av, where we have all these laws. You're not allowed to eat and you're not allowed to bathe and oil yourself and relations and shoes and all that."
It's another reason. The reason is that perhaps Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi lived in a time where his Rebbeim were the ones who created certain standards for flying stuff. And those standards were in flux. Some were accepted, some weren't accepted, some were hard, some were crystallized, some were modified. After Yehuda HaNasi, after once we sealed that era, and we went into the time of, let's say, the Gaonim and the Rishonim, we don't have the opportunity nor the bandwidth to play the games, because we don't know what the unintended consequence is going to be. We're going through a slippery slope, and all things start to fall apart. So we try to adhere to the letter of the laws, so to speak. Even if it's a minute, even if it's a say, even if it's a tightness, a baby stabbing, and we don't want to deviate from it, because once we start deviating from it, everybody's going to deviate to their own. Everybody's going to sing to their own tune. But Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was not in our era; he was in that era where things were like still flexible. So when you think about Tisha B'Av and all the halachas involved in Tisha B'Av, and all the halachas involved in Bechos HaMozen and Bechos HaShtach and Bechos HaNenin and Lulav and Esrog and all these things, they were works of art. They were crystallizing it then.
Exactly what I was asking. Like that was the incubator.
Right. Exactly right. That was the incubator. That's great.
And the point is that no, I see and then the brilliance of the Talmud and of the Rishonim, the commentators in the Talmud is that we don't just discuss the conclusion. We also try to figure out the halachic understanding, or what would Rebbe's understanding be if the Havamina, the initial thinking of what the Gemara understood what Rabbi Yehuda was doing, kind of, and we're moving with it. Like you're saying, it's things are not, we don't know. But for instance, we don't know if Shiva Asur B'Tammuz, like what you're saying, it could have been, it's possible, according to the Ritva, clearly it seems from the Ritva, that Shiva Asur B'Tammuz used to be as severe as Tisha B'Av. A lot of things kind of, today, we know Shiva Asur B'Tammuz is this way, and Tisha B'Av is that way. But like you're saying, by the time, then those days also, the Jewish people also going through stronger, larger waves of ups and downs. You know, there things were really bad or really good or okay, good. Now it kind of settled into.
And even the Gemara works around certain realities that our forefathers were very involved, some of them, politically. Yehuda HaNasi certainly was very connected politically. So, you know, when you talk about appeasement, you know, how should a Jew behave when he's under attack? Well, we give gifts, we appease. It's like Yaakov Avinu and Asa. You know, what do we really do? Or do we go out and fight? Like this, we had the same debate today. What should Eretz Yisrael do? Should we try to appease the Iranians and the Saudis and the this and that and the Palestinians, or do we build a defense wall? Okay, so obviously we do both. Yaakov Avinu did both, so we do both. But there's no question about the fact that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi and others were very connected to the government, and sometimes you do things in a display to show how much you admire the government. Now, that's me talking. I don't know if anybody says that. But sometimes your motivation and your agenda is not just halacha. I'm not talking about going against halacha. I'm talking about when you're establishing things. Sometimes you just want to show you want to ingratiate your religion. You know what? We had this Tisha B'Av.
we're downgrading it. Our relationship is wonderful. And it's a support of, it's a political shift.
I want to add to this because
ask real fast, so is that it sounds like Chorus or something.
It could be something. I open.
No. There's a basis for what he's saying. There's a basis for Rabbi Gala. So I'll tell you what. We're going to come now. We're not going to get there. We're just going to get this last answer, and then we'll stop the class. But the Gemara goes about the tree planting that he planted. Where did he plant it, and what day was it? The 15th or 14th. What was Rebbe's connection to Tveria? Why was Rebbe connected to Tveria? Rebbe Yehuda was because he organized in his political connections with Antoninus, which was either the governor or the Caesar himself, to give a discount. It's very in line with today's politics to the rabbis of Tveria not to have to pay taxes. They made Tveria a tax haven for the rabbis. And how is Rebbe able to do that? Because he was politically connected to, and these taxes went to Rome. So he was able to, because he was politically connected to Antoninus, and he was his Rebbe, he was his teacher, and Antoninus appreciated the Torah scholars. So they made Tveria into a tax haven for the Torah scholars, which wouldn't go down well in today's politics, but Rebbe pulled it off. So he had this kind of, maybe for that, to Rabbi Gela's point, trying to downgrade the severity of the mourning of, so to say, of this. But the Gemara says it's not what happened. Rabbi said, Rebbe, you're misunderstanding the story. This was a Tisha B'Av that fell out on Shabbos. Shabbos, they pushed it off to Sunday, which is the halacha. We fast on the 10th, which would be Sunday till today. But so Rebbe said no. If it's pushed off, just forget about it. We're not fasting. The rabbi said no, it doesn't work like that. You push it off to Sunday. So the rabbis, because Reb Abba Bar Zavda explained the story this way, the rabbis of the Talmud were much happier with this understanding of what Rebbe was doing with Tisha B'Av than trying to downgrade the severity in general of Tisha B'Av. And he called on him the verse, always good to have a conversation with two people, so then we could get to a better conclusion than if we would just think on our own and think that Rebbe was just trying to abolish the entire holiday or to downgrade the holiday, the fast day. And like this, we could say was an isolated story that when it falls out on Shabbos, where he's in the opinion of Kiva and the Nitcha Yitcha. And it's kind of what the Gemara stays with. And the last piece of the Gemara is that, like I said, they're trying to figure out of when he planted and where did Rebbe live and what is the situation of Tveria. But what we do know is that Tveria is brought down by the Achronim, that one of the things about Tveria was that Tveria was a tax haven organized by Rebbe and Antoninus for the rabbis, that they shouldn't have to pay the taxes so they could study Torah and avoid the draft. Just put that out there. All right, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your day and safe day.
Oh,